Quick intro. My name is Sam. I'm the founder and CEO of Writesonic. Today I have Nikki Lam from NP Digital. She's the SVP of Earned Media at NP Digital, just joining us. And we have been planning this for a long time, so really excited to have her here. And just to share a quick context on what we'll be talking about today, of course, everyone is talking about AI search. People's SEO traffic is going down. Everyone is wondering how to rank on ChatGPT, Perplexity, AI overviews, all of these platforms. And most of that advice right now in the market is about your website. Like, what do you do about your own content, your schema, your meta tags? But when you actually look at the data, your website is actually a very small part of that equation. 82% of the AI citations actually come from content or the pieces that you actually don't own. So things like Reddit, YouTube, even TikTok, I just heard, LinkedIn, news websites, so all those different kinds of websites which are not directly in your control. That's where most of the citations are coming from. And nobody has thought about multi-platform search longer than Nikki. Her agency also coined this term. I think instead of SEO, search engine optimization, they coined this term search everywhere optimization, I guess sometime last year, which is something we would we would love to learn a bit more about. And she runs SEO, content, digital PR, various other earned media things for brands like Adobe, SoFi, Western Union, and also writes quite a lot of great pieces. I've read quite a lot of her content that she posted on Search Engine Land. And of course, she's a Brighton SEO speaker as well. So that's a bit about her. Nikki, maybe if you want to add anything or quickly introduce yourself, and then we'll get right into it.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. And I have to be honest, I didn't technically coin the term search everywhere optimization. I read about it on Search Engine Land probably at least a year before I started speaking about it, which is also more like 2 years ago now. That was in 2024, when
Mhm.
I really started seeing that even our clients who were doing things right, their traffic was stagnating or worse, maybe declining. And at NP Digital, we're working with big brands. They're well established. We've got, a lot of enterprise brands, Fortune 1000 brands, and seeing traffic, start to stagnate or decline for them. And they were doing a lot of things right. We really had to take a step back and figure out like what's going on here. Why are click-through rates down? Why is traffic declining? But a lot of our clients are still ranking really well. So out of that, and after seeing some, thought leadership online on places like Search Engine Land, we really started talking a lot about search everywhere optimization. And Neil's audience is so big, so they give him credit
Yeah.
for kind of coining this term. But regardless of who came up with the term, I think it's been such a critical part of how we strategize for our clients. Because to your point, Sam, what everyone's talking about today is, what do I do on my website? And those
Right.
days are they're not over, right? Like, your website is still an instrumental tool in how you capture demand today, but it's not the full picture anymore. So yeah, search everywhere optimization was really born out of that.
Sounds good. Sounds good. And so, just for quick context for everyone, so the way we'll structure today's call, it would be a very engaging back and forth conversation, almost like a real-time podcast. You can think of it like that. So we won't go through any of those corporate boring slides. We'll just keep it very, very much like a podcast today. So I think Nikki already covered quite a lot of things about search everywhere optimization. Maybe Nikki, just to expand on that a little bit more, how do you define that, and what are you seeing currently in this space? Beyond Google? Like, what does search everywhere mean beyond Google
Mhm.
right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, search everywhere means something different to every brand. For example, at NP Digital, we're doing a ton of video across places like YouTube and TikTok, because that content really works for us. But your audience, spends time in different places. You have to really do the audience research to understand. Today, that includes places like Reddit, ChatGPT, and all of the other AI platforms that you can track through Writesonic. Social content on places like Instagram and I already said TikTok. So it's really a diverse, landscape. If your brand is e-commerce, it might mean that you're thinking about what your retail and marketplace strategy is across places like eBay, Etsy, Walmart.com, stuff like that. So it's expanding. I think the big thing that we'll talk about today too is just third-party content, right?
Mm,
That's a key part of our search everywhere
right.
ecosystem is what type of content is off-site and getting cited in these AI platforms, and how can you make sure that your brand has a presence there?
I really like what you mentioned about, that audience part is very important because if you are just going for certain platforms for the sake of it, it won't actually then convert later on if your audience is not there. A very good example, I think, here is if you see B2B, most of those folks who are working in these corporate organizations are limited to using Microsoft Copilot because that's the only sort of approved,
Mm,
chatbot of choice. They
yep,
don't have access to ChatGPT or Perplexity or any of those on their laptops. So of course, I think for that kind of audience, you probably want to look at Microsoft Copilot or LinkedIn kind of a thing as compared to something which is like Grok or something else. So that's a pretty
yep,
interesting point I think you mentioned there.
yep.
Um, Sounds good. I think another thing here, which I think everyone keeps running into, where there are people who think, SEO is no longer needed. It's all about geo, AI search, all that kind of stuff. At the same time, I think what our thesis is, SEO is still very much the foundation of geo. So like it's still quite
Mhm.
important. But at the same time, you also can't ignore the fact that uh, it is starting to divert. So there are certain things that you need to do a bit differently with AI search as compared to just Google, what you used to do, right? And which is where again, just like what people say, just add geo to our SEO team and we are done. That doesn't
Yep.
directly work because there's a lot of different teams now that need to come together. There's digital PR, there's like, content, there's SEO, there's maybe reputation management, PR. So, a few other teams that come in. And there's actually data backing this up, right? Like we ran our own citation study on GPT 5.4, which is like one of the recent OpenAI models. 75% of what ChatGPT cites comes from sources that don't rank on traditional search engines at all. So we checked the overlap between the citations on ChatGPT versus a Google or a Bing. And we saw that there's like a big difference in terms of like there's very little overlap there, right? Um, so basically, it's sort of like saying that there are certain new things you need to do there, right? From your perspective, if you could talk about NP Digital being an SEO focused company, at least from what I understand since before, how have you seen that evolve over time, or at least in the last 2 years since ChatGPT launched?
Yep. Yeah, great question. And yeah, we were definitely born, out of SEO, and you're completely right. There, I think there's a tension around, oh, good SEO is good GEO because there's so much um, thought leadership in the space right now that is, in my opinion, overcomplicating AI search and GEO. So you've got the people who are like making it an incredibly overcomplicated technical thing, which it is complicated, right? And it is very technical. But on the other hand, at NP Digital, we've seen a lot of the tactics that we would have implemented for clients on an SEO campaign anyway move that needle. With that said, I think you're right. If you're simply taking your SEO playbook and you're just pointing it at ChatGPT, it's not going to work because of the data that you've cited, right? So much, and there are industry studies that show this. We've got, I think, 35 clients set up on Writesonic. And what we're seeing in our data is that anywhere from 80 to 90% of the content that's getting cited is not your owned content, right? It's other third-party content. So if your playbook isn't accounting for that and you're just trying to, do your typical SEO optimizations on your website, then you're going to be missing that. I think the other thing that is interesting to us is that we've seen different tactics work on different platforms, right? So we know that ChatGPT tends to lean heavily on sources like Wikipedia, which is something that we're, tackling and optimizing for our clients. What's their Wikipedia presence? How outdated is it? Can we get that updated? And Reddit is another big one for ChatGPT. Whereas, Google AI overviews are citing a ton of YouTube content. So just rinsing and repeating your SEO playbook and thinking this is going to work for all of the different AI models, like it might work for one or it might partially work for one, but it's certainly not going to get you everywhere you want to go across all of the top models.
Makes sense. Also, just a quick note, if anyone has any questions as we are, discussing through these things, please put it down in the Q&A section. We'll cover it towards the end of the webinar. So just a quick reminder for that. And great points, I think, Nikki, that you mentioned. And again, from what we have seen from our data, also a few other researches that got published, there are a couple of channels which are dominating. So I think Reddit is one of the most cited sources across pretty much every AI model right now. We are also seeing a lot of LinkedIn, Wikipedia, and then there's these review platforms like G2 and Capterra, Trustpilot,
Yep.
even Medium.com is there, right? In fact, Medium.com, I think we are seeing even more than Substack from a newsletter or
Mm.
that standpoint. Um, so I would say, yeah, these are some of the core sort of earned media platforms, right? And then, of course, there's the whole YouTube thing. I think in the last 3 or 4 months, YouTube picked up quite a lot, especially for Google AI overviews, Perplexity, because a lot of it depends on the Google search algorithm, right?
Yep.
Um, so I think the interesting thing would love to understand is there's so many AI models right now. There's ChatGPT, Gemini, Perplexity, all of that. Some of their citation domains or sources overlap quite a bit, like Reddit and all of these. And then at
Hmm.
the same time, there's also maybe some nuances between each of those, right? What is your point of view in terms of do people or do brands need to do something differently across different platforms, or should they just do the same set of things and it would work across all of them?
So, my answer today, based on what we're seeing in our client data at NP Digital, is that if you're going to be focused on tactics that are going to move the needle where it matters most, that's typically going to be ChatGPT and Google surfaces, right? Google AI overviews have really changed everything we know about how users are engaging, and that's a really big one. And we know that Google still has the market share. Yes, search is fracturing, not just from traditional Google to ChatGPT, but also the other platforms we're talking about here today, right? TikTok, Reddit. But Google still dominates in terms of the market share. So I would be putting my emphasis on testing and tweaking what works across ChatGPT because it is the number one driver of AI referral traffic that we've seen in our client portfolio. Not only that, it's converting like at crazy rates. We've seen conversion rates from ChatGPT traffic upwards of like 8 or 9%, right? Which is 2, 3, 4 times what other channels are able to do. And so from that perspective, we have seen different tactics work across different models. Like, for example, snippet style content, things like adding key takeaways onto your content, FAQs. Even I love the insights in Writesonic where it will recommend comparison style content.
And let's say if we deep dive, we'll focus on some of these platforms that we just discussed, right? So I think Reddit is probably the biggest one. And there have been sort of these lawsuits, I guess, from Reddit also. I believe with Perplexity, they did one last year where I think it was supposed to then that, okay, Perplexity's Reddit citations would go down, but actually it has stayed consistent. So Reddit is still one of the top citation sources for Perplexity. And then same thing, I think, of course, across Gemini, ChatGPT, almost every platform, Reddit is being cited there, right? And I think now cracking Reddit is very sort of challenging in a way as well, because the moment you post anything, even a little bit promotional, they'll instant ban you really, right? So it's quite interesting. Um, and I think we did like an experiment on our side on this, where I think there were two team members. We worked for 6 weeks, like no paid budget, and we did some activities there, basically just commenting on the right threads and starting new threads. And our AI brand mentions actually increased by 240%. So it went from I think
Oh,
6,400 to some
wow.
22,000 just by doing some comments and some threads that we started, right? But what I'm curious to understand is you work with these enterprise brands. Let's say you have Adobe or you have, Western Union and all these kinds of ones. They, I don't know if they can do that kind of work or if they have like the relevant people, who can do that kind of high level work there to actually be on brand and still do these
Mhm.
activities. So what's your usual strategy with clients on Reddit? Like, how do you go about that without being banned again? Banned again?
Yeah, it's a great question. Reddit definitely trips marketers up. In a lot of new business pitches today, we're talking about Reddit, and I will say it is the section of every new business pitch where undoubtedly somebody is going to
Yeah.
chime in and ask questions because it definitely is intimidating to people, but it doesn't have to be. And I think I've written a couple pieces on search engine land about Reddit and what works. And I would say part of that thought leadership I've put out there talks about the crawl, walk, run framework.
Mm.
Reddit is not a platform where you can just start running out of the gate, right? You have to spend maybe even, weeks to months listening, especially if you're a big brand. Every subreddit has its own culture and personality. It's got its own rules, and you kind of have to learn the language of that subreddit before you dive in. How do people talk about your category and the problems in there? How do people respond? And so we always recommend that you spend a lot of time up front, a couple months, getting to know the subreddit, starting to upvote things. If you come in hot and you're trying to post branded content right off the bat, you're definitely going to be banned. Another thing that is really important is showing up authentically, right? I think people have this perception that Redditors and the Reddit platform itself doesn't want brands in there. And some people might feel that way. But I think by and large, what people don't want is like inauthentic conversations where these brands are coming in trying to pretend like they're customers, but it's really the brand. So in that crawl phase, what's really important is to have an account, or actually many accounts is what we would recommend, where you are disclosing who you are, right? So you would be Sam at Writesonic. I would be NP Digital Nikki, something like that. And it's really important to be transparent about who you are. And then when you do start to engage, like first you just got to sit back, observe, soak it all in, slowly start upvoting things. Then when you want to post your own comment, don't be salesy. It's all about being helpful. And we activated on Reddit for our tax client, which is another one of the case studies that I'll walk through today. And, a big part of that was thinking about what are the actual problems that people have in tax season, which, actually we're in it right now. Tomorrow, I think, is the last day to file.
Yeah.
And so we were trying to just be genuinely helpful. And I think, a question that you can ask yourself when you're engaging on Reddit is like, am I posting this only because I'm trying to promote the brand, or am I posting this because it's genuinely helpful? And even if I weren't mentioning the brand, it would still be helpful. So I think that's like a really big test. Just no hard sells. So yeah, take your time, be genuine, be authentic, be helpful.
And how do you, so in the end, what you want in terms of AI is, mentions, right? So you want basically that Reddit post to be cited and your mentions to go up so that your visibility goes up, right? When you're writing something helpful, I'm not sure if you can mention the product or, the brand or whatever that you're trying to promote, right? So how do you think that relates to the actual end goal, which is like increasing the visibility there?
I think you can mention brands and products, especially, thinking about like a crawl, walk, run. A lot of big brands have their own subreddits where people are literally
Mm,
there to talk only
right.
about that brand and its products. Even if the subreddit isn't only specifically about the brand, like say in the instance of the tax client that we were working with, if somebody's like, hey, I'm a side hustler. This is my first time doing my own taxes. I haven't found a platform that allows me to do XYZ. And you're the brand, you're like, hey, you know what? Actually, you can do that on this platform. Like that's genuinely helpful. So you can mention the brand once you've really got a team built up that understands and speaks to the platform well. Ideally, you have your own subreddit and you're really driving conversations forward that are all about your brand there. So I think, again, there's this perception that Reddit can't be a branded play. But if you're doing it the right way today, I'd say it has to be a branded play because you have to disclose who you are, who you're speaking on behalf of.
That's very interesting. I think because The usual play before used to be that you spin up a bunch of Reddit accounts which are not your brand, and you sort
Mm,
of try to use those accounts to comment that, hey, this is the better product. Right? That is what used to be, I guess, what a lot of Reddit marketers focus on. So I think what you mentioned is quite an interesting take where you want to be authentic and actually mention
mhm.
it from the brand side itself. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I think Reddit as a platform has probably gotten better at detecting stuff like that now, and it's just not going to work. You're going to invest a lot of time and energy, and you're going to have account after account, banned.
Yeah.
So I definitely would not recommend that.
Yeah, yeah. Also, another thing just to add to Reddit. Reddit also, a lot of people talk about your product or your service or whatever that your brand is trying to sell, right? In a negative and positive way, both, and probably a lot more negative impact from there. So one of the other signals apart from visibility or citations is the sentiment. If you're
Yep.
showing up everywhere, but your overall sentiment in LLMs is negative, it's going to have a negative impact there, right? So, what's your
Yep.
take on again, maybe either with Reddit or any other platforms for that matter, any of these review ones and all that, to sort of control your brand perception? Or if you are a brand, let's say, which has certain, let's say, negative posts which are affecting your sentiment, how do you go about fixing it and making sure that, it's positively conveyed going forward?
Yep, that's a great question. So I have a two-part answer. One of the things that I haven't mentioned yet is that some of our clients at NP Digital, they actually have entire teams. And I'm thinking of a client that's more in the SaaS space, but they have an entire, I want to say it's like 100 happy customers who are
Mhm.
actually active on Reddit on their behalf because they love their product, they believe in it, and they ask them, hey, would you be willing to go in and have conversations in places like Reddit on our behalf? And so creating kind of like that advocacy group, this is scaled, right? So this SaaS client has 100 people, but you don't have to start with 100, right? If you've got two customers who are telling you, I love your product, I'm telling my friends, my family, whatever about your product. You're like, hey, would you mind going and telling, your Reddit community about it in an authentic and genuine way? And you might be surprised what you can get out of that type of program. That right there helps to combat negative sentiment and overcome, where that negative sentiment might be coming from. The other thing I would say is I think half the time it's just having the data to make the decisions on where to focus. So for the tax client that we did this whole Reddit strategy for, they needed to understand like where was sentiment the worst. As we head into peak tax season, what are the things that people were asking or talking about or saying online that was like genuinely detrimental to their business? And so that's the data that we surfaced. I mean, and honestly, because we were working with them in peak tax season, we were giving them daily insights on what conversations they needed to go in and activate on. So I think that the sentiment is, it's important to prioritize the worst sentiment, the things that are the most detrimental to your business, and then using that same strategy. Ideally, if you have a seasonal business like tax,
Yeah,
don't start that strategy a couple months before, right? Like start it as early as you
way in
can,
advance.
build
Yeah.
up that presence, and then look at the data. I think Writesonic, at least in our account, right, it's giving you daily updates. So go in, look at what changed today, and then go activate.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Now let's talk about video, right? In terms of video, I think YouTube in the last few months has become like a beast in terms of, being cited, especially I think in Google AI overviews, Perplexity, a few other platforms. ChatGPT, I think the citation share is still quite low, but at least in Google owned properties, it's quite a lot. And I think
Mhm.
Neil and you guys do a lot of video content, and I think it's on YouTube, it's on LinkedIn, it's on TikTok, maybe a few other channels that I don't know. But what's your take on video, and especially in both perspectives? One, in terms of search everywhere, where you want that, okay, if your audience is there, they want to see your
Mhm.
content and all that. And second, also in the terms of AI search specifically, if you think that that content is helping your brand, like NP Digital as a brand, get more cited or get more mentioned in those LLMs as well.
Yeah, great question. It is absolutely helping NP Digital because I look at AI overviews in our industry, and Neil's video content is there in the AI overviews. And,
Some,
YouTube is something that excites me and it frustrates me at the same time because I've been putting together YouTube strategy decks for clients and prospects for so long now. And I feel like it's something that our clients understand it's important, but most of them have a really hard time acting on it. And so I think it's honestly like one of the biggest missed opportunities in our space right now. And I think, I get it. It's not always the cheapest thing to roll out a video strategy, especially because you need to be consistent like any other platform. You can't like launch a few videos today and then not post anything for a year
yeah,
and expect that to carry you through.
right,
But I also feel like the brands, because we work with a lot of enterprise brands, they are doing video, but they're thinking about it simply as a social media play or a brand awareness play. And they're not necessarily connecting those dots yet to AI visibility. But to your point, right, the data, you can't ignore it, right? It's always been, or not always, but it's been the second largest search engine, and we know Google likes to cite its own content,
right.
right? So I think that the rate at which Google's going to continue to cite YouTube video content within AI overviews is only going to continue to grow. And I think the reason that video content is so highly cited is because it's kind of that trust factor, right? Like a lot of things, and even video today is AI generated, but we know that video content is often produced to be a little bit more like genuinely useful and authentic. It's conversational. It answers questions in plain language a lot of the times, and it's really topically like it adds to your topical authority. So when someone sits on camera like Neil, right, and explains these complicated marketing things, the transcript of that is gold. And that's really helpful to kind of boost, these AI models' semantic understanding of like, what is this content? And I think the thing that's, I said earlier, like video excites me, it frustrates me. Like, I think the thing that frustrates me is that it is an investment to roll out a full video program,
Yeah,
but the compounding effects of video content, which we see at NP Digital, right? Like we might sit down and film, some type of round table discussion like this with Neil, and then they can splice it into content that they can push on, TikTok and Instagram and YouTube Shorts and YouTube. And that content is showing up in so many different places, right? We're talking about how YouTube shows up in Google AI overviews, but there's this flood of content from social platforms coming into Google's SERP now, in this SERP feature that's called What People Are Saying. There's there's tons of video content from TikTok, YouTube Shorts, other platforms. And then again, it's also pulling into these AI models. So you can create video content and you can leverage it in so many places, even your website, right? Like you can embed a YouTube video onto the content of your website, and that's probably going to have an opportunity to boost your engagement rate. So definitely such a big thing that we're speaking to clients about all the time, but something that it just seems is really hard for brands to figure out how to activate on.
It's a lot of effort to, get in front of the camera, record it, have new video ideas, and then edit and then post it, right? So I guess that's like the blocker for most companies, where it's like, okay, I've done 2 videos. It's too much work now. I'll just stop it and focus on blogs or
Yep.
something else. So,
It is, but I would say we rolled out our thought leadership video strategy. Gosh, my son is 3 years old now, and I think I was filming for NP Digital when I was pregnant with him. So at least 3.5, 4 years ago now. And it took a little bit of getting used to, right? Like industry news would happen and we're like, oh, we got to get a video out about this. But we built an infrastructure where we've trained up people all across the globe at NP Digital to figure out what this looks like. And it's as simple as like you take your cell phone and you can film a transcript with, there's apps that help you do this, and it
right.
can be a selfie video that you then blast out to TikTok, Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts really quickly. So I think it doesn't have to be expensive. You don't have to do some, full fancy video production. It could be me and you having a FaceTime conversation just like this, and then pushing it out to all these platforms. So I think once you sit down and you figure out what's an inexpensive, low effort way to do this, how can we scale that? You can even use AI to help you figure out what your transcripts are, right? Hey, this piece of news just broke in my industry. You can create a Claude project or a custom GPT that knows you want, maybe 60-second max videos. They'll make a whole transcript for you. You customize it, you post it. So it doesn't have to be as complicated as everyone's making it.
Makes sense. Also interesting, I was checking a research, I think the last week. It was quite interesting. It mentioned that 94% of YouTube citations actually go to long form content. Shorts are about 5%. But what is more
Mm.
interesting is, people go after the engagement, like how many likes I got or how many views and all those things I got. But actually, even videos which have less than 1,000 views were getting cited quite a lot if you make that video specifically answering a specific query or a prompt like directly. So if you make like a 4 or 5 minute video directly answering that question, it gets indexed and that picks up irrespective of it got like a million views or like 10 views or whatever. So I think that is quite interesting.
Yeah, that is super interesting. And I think like part of that, what that sparks in my brain is like there's the technical element of how your videos are going to work for you too, right? Like your transcripts have to be accurate and complete. You want to make sure, to your point, like you're answering real important questions. Because to your point, there might only be 1,000 views, but if it's a really good piece of valuable content and it's answering real user questions, and you've done the work to like make sure that your title, your description, your transcript is all optimized, there's definitely a value there.
Makes sense. I think next thing I want to get into is LinkedIn. Now, LinkedIn is not very well known. There's not a lot of research on, LinkedIn being like one of the top citation sources. But
Mm.
interestingly, I think I've been observing it last few months. LinkedIn and also probably like interestingly Facebook as well. I've seen that it's appearing in a lot of citations, which is very weird because
Oh,
Facebook you
Facebook.
wouldn't. Yeah,
I
yeah.
didn't
So
realize that. I've learned something.
yeah. So Facebook, I think it's not in the top 10 or 20, but it's definitely in those top 50 citation sources. It's very interesting that Facebook is being picked up, even though it's more like it's very random things that people post there, right? But what is interesting with, I think if we talk about LinkedIn, I think we did some research on this. So it's the second or third most cited source across AI search. Again, depends on which industry it is. And ChatGPT itself cites LinkedIn in about 14% of the responses. I think Google AI mode is 13%. And for any, if you can imagine, professional or B2B query, LinkedIn is one of those top sources there, right? So I think would love to understand from you, from our perspective, what we have seen is that there are 2, 3 things from LinkedIn that get cited. So one is the actual posts. Second is the articles, which I think they call it LinkedIn Pulse. And then
Yep.
third thing, what we also see is the actual profiles of people also get cited, like the actual profiles, not even a post, right?
Yep.
Would love to hear about, I don't know if you guys have done any work or even for your own brand, if you've seen LinkedIn showing up for any of those prompts or queries as well.
Yeah, being super transparent, I would say LinkedIn is one of the platforms that I haven't figured out quite as much as some of the others in the search everywhere umbrella. But we've also seen an influx of LinkedIn content getting cited within Google. And I know in AI overviews, I see LinkedIn content. So I think one of the interesting things about the stats that you just shared about like, okay, it's really like the profile, the pulse content, or what are the articles are. Um, Search everywhere is, it's not just about the brand itself, it's about the people who also are a reflection in the face of that brand. So, Neil founded NP Digital, right? And he is oftentimes the face of the company, especially with like thought leadership online. But I mentioned that, at least 4 years ago now, we started having other thought leaders at our company create content. And LinkedIn is definitely a part of that, because similar to how today, it's not just what you say about yourself on your own website, right? It's all this third party content. I would say in the LinkedIn realm, it's teaching us that it's not just about what the brand says across other channels, it's about what other extensions of that brand are saying. And so I think content syndication in general is essential in this age. And I think LinkedIn is one of those channels where, yes, if you have some thought leadership content or you have a perspective, repurpose that into LinkedIn in multiple different ways. Have your thought leaders across the company talking about that on LinkedIn. Repost that content as an article on LinkedIn. Link back to your website so that it knows where it's from. But especially with the rate at which LinkedIn is getting cited in AI today, which I wasn't sure, I wasn't aware that it was like 14% on ChatGPT. That's really high. I know I do see it a lot in AI overviews. Yeah, you want to figure out how LinkedIn can be part of your content syndication strategy.
Makes sense. Now, I want to get into digital PR as well. But before that, I think you had mentioned you have a case study that you can walk us through, maybe some tips or certain things you can share. So we can walk through that and then we can talk more about digital PR, sponsored content, all those kinds of things as well.
Yeah, so I've mentioned this a little bit throughout my talk track, but I do have a case study that I think perfectly illustrates a lot of what we've been talking about, and it is that tax brand that we worked with, in peak tax season last year. And the reason why I love this case study is because it included a lot of the different elements that we're talking about today. It included video, both from the brand and from influencers, which I'm really passionate also about activating influencers. And it included Reddit was a huge part of that strategy, as we heard, and the results really spanned, social media, getting them, picked up in AI search. So it really was like a very comprehensive strategy. So, this brand is a household name in tax, right? They weren't some small new brand trying to enter the market. They're already one of the market leaders, and they had a strong Google presence. But, their sentiment left, especially in peak tax season, left a little bit to be desired. And you brought that up, right? It's not just do you show up or not? It's are people speaking about you favorably? So I would say we ran like at least 4 different tracks all in parallel to make a big impact during peak tax season. So first, we did a content audit, right? Nothing super glamorous. What content do you have? What content are you missing? And I think what separates our content and audit in this case apart from what a lot of people are doing is we didn't just go use SEO or even just AI search data, right? We were looking at media sentiment, what's trending, competitor activity, other influencer campaigns, all to make sure that the content plan that we were putting in place for them was going to fill gaps from all of those perspectives. We also did a blog optimization. So we refreshed their content with not just more keywords, but also EEAT factors, which is huge for LLMs and Google, right? Getting experts quoted within the content, stuff like that. And so we ended up building out like a bunch of localized tax guides that covered all 50 states for them. I think that effort alone, like that content in a short amount of time had like 6 million impressions in search. We also did this campaign. I mentioned earlier, some of the Reddit work was like, I mentioned side hustler. So we did a side hustler awareness campaign that was like very data driven, and it was audience specific, right? We know that speaking directly to one of your ideal customer profiles in this age of AI is really important. So they have a big audience with people who are side hustlers trying to figure out, how to manage their taxes. And so for that, we were actually pitching, big media outlets like Forbes, Go Banking Rates, that content that we were able to, publish on these third-party places also drove visits back to the website. And we know that these mentions and citations offsite are also critical for LLM visibility. Then we also activated influencers across Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. They were creating content. One of the things that I've been, passionate about speaking to lately, thanks to our incredible influencer teams, is keyword inclusion in your influencer briefs. A lot of people are doing influencer. A lot of people aren't thinking about how that content is actually search inventory, right? So activating all these influencers for this tax company, and we're telling them, mention these keywords and these phrases within the content. It doesn't even mean it has to be non-branded. It can even be like branded things, right? So we activated those influencers, and then Reddit, of course, which I've already spoken about, was another huge part of that campaign. And the results were absolutely phenomenal. Like, we drove their blog traffic was up like 30% year over year. Their branded impressions were up. Their non-branded impressions were up. Their referral traffic was up. We really changed the sentiment, the ratio of negative to positive sentiment. We impacted that. Trying to remember what all the other stats were, but yeah, it was a really fantastic campaign that brought together all these different elements of search everywhere. And it was amazing to see the results. I'd say the one thing that, that still gets me a little bit is that I know that like, we have all these incredible stats about what we were able to do. And it was like a 2,000 increase in link in bio clicks, right? We got great results. But I know that the sum of all those parts is like larger than what we could truly speak to in that case study. And I think this is something that anyone doing search everywhere, I think, has to grapple with. The measurement, we call it building the plane as we fly it at NP Digital. The measurement's just not 100% refined yet to what we would like it to be. And that doesn't mean we didn't, we measured all these individual parts, but how do you show the overarching value of all of that and how it all works together, right? Like, somebody probably saw one of those TikTok videos about filing taxes. Then they went to ChatGPT to ask a follow-up question. Then they go to Google and they search the brand, and how that all connects together, and how you work on your attribution models to make sure that you're truly understanding how it works all together, is really difficult.
Oh, that's amazing. It's still like a very holistic strategy where you're doing all of these things together rather than one or the other, right?
Yeah.
Makes sense. Also, I think just doubling down on that digital PR, you already covered, Forbes and all of these different things that you had mentioned. There are two sort of contrarian or sort of interesting takes I want to focus on. One is, I think, again, I read a recent study on this where content distribution services like these PR, Newswire, and these kinds of services, for SEO, I think they don't get picked up much because it's sort of seen as kind of sponsored content. But at the
Mhm.
same time, I think with AI, just distributing that through these services gets picked up by AI, like the overall, mentions and citations, those sort of increase there, right? Same thing
Yep.
if you talk about sponsored content. Now, again, Google sees that sponsored tag and Google does not, I think, rank that. But at the same time, I think from what we are seeing, ChatGPT and all these models do pick it up. So even though it is sponsored, they, at least at this point, they don't care about sponsored versus unsponsored as long as the content is there, right? What's your take on that from a digital PR perspective, or what you are seeing in the industry?
Yeah, there's a few things I would touch on. We have other case studies at NP Digital about how we've garnered AI success for our clients, and one of them, which they do software for, like, company boards, so like executive boards. PR was a big part of that, not just digital PR and getting these third-party mentions, but anytime they were going to put out a press release, we're like, let us look at it, let us optimize that. And I know in one of those cases, the press release that we helped them with got cited like almost 90 times. And I
Oh,
can't
wow.
remember if it was all ChatGPT or if it was across all the models that we were tracking in Writesonic. But so yeah, to your point, like, this stuff works. And I think the thing about PR is, we oftentimes, when we're coming in to work with a company that either has their own in-house PR team or they've got another agency, we have to sit down and explain, like, we've got our own swim lanes. The stuff that you all are likely working on, it might be like, you have relationships with these big outlets and they're going for reach and impression, which is great. But they're not thinking about the outlets that are getting cited commonly, in AI. Or even if they are, another thing that I'm seeing is we'll look at the specific pieces of content getting cited, and they'll say, "Oh, yeah, we have a relationship with them. We've got a lot of stuff going on with them." And we're like, "Well, in terms of the exact content that's getting cited, you're not mentioned in those pieces of content." So you really have to to break down those barriers and have those conversations and show the data about where they're missing and going and outreaching to those those outlets is essential. We do work for like a large financial company, and there was I think it was CNBC article that, they might have a relationship with CNBC already, but there was a specific article talking about like, the best money transfer apps of 2026. They weren't included, right? So their PR
Mm.
teams got other stuff going on there, but this specific roundup or listicle didn't include them. And so we had to go to the journalists and say, hey, like, why isn't this brand? And they're like, well, we'd need more information. Like, give me these bits, and we're not sure how this stacks up. And it was that back and forth conversation, building that relationship and getting them cited in that content was huge for their AI citation rates. So even though the relationships might already be there, your PR team might be doing a lot of work already, the right domains and the right specific pieces of content are everything when it comes to driving AI visibility.
Makes sense. Sounds good. So we're almost on time. There's last two things I want to cover. One, I think this is a question I ask everyone because I'm pretty sure you're also seeing it from your clients as well, is attribution. So with SEO, attribution was, and with also other marketing channels, attribution is relatively simpler. But right now with AI, due to
Yep.
the zero clicks and all this kind of stuff, attribution is a big issue, right? And when you're talking to a CMO or you're talking to, like a senior like VP or that kind of person, right? All they care about is pipeline revenue, sort of the hard metrics
Mhm.
there. How do you usually talk to those people or explain to them, and how do you link that? Okay, if my AI visibility or citation share is improving, how does that have an impact over my, actual revenue and those kinds of hard metrics there?
Yep. Yeah, I think this is such an important conversation and it's tricky. I see a lot of people overcomplicate the conversation for that CMO board level conversation because from the top down, everyone wants to talk about AI search right now, right? CMOs and boards are coming and saying, hey, what's our GEO strategy? And like, show me the data. And I think the mistake that a lot of teams are making when they're reporting is they're throwing too many of the leading indicators into these presentations, right? Your board and your CMO probably don't need to hear that your perplexity score, visibility score went up by like 13 percentage points, right? You have to kind of break it down into something more digestible. Oftentimes, what that framework might look like is yes, there is are we getting discovered? That's your visibility layer. That's like, I would focus on things like share of voice, which is something, again, you can get out of Writesonic. Things like your branded search volume, because we know that people are asking a question on ChatGPT, and they may not click what's cited there. They might go to Google and then do a branded search from there. So yeah, are we getting discovered? What's that visibility look like? Then are we being chosen? How do we know that those increases in visibility are actually leading to people having a preference for our brand? So that's going to be things like your direct traffic, your click-through rate on branded keywords, things like that. And then the most important is, of course, business outcomes. That's what the C-suite cares about. And that's really like your revenue pipeline layer. So that's where you want to look at, your conversion rate from your AI referral traffic, how much pipeline or revenue is being attributed to these channels. And that's where you really need to move the conversation away from these marketing metrics and just get really focused on your business outcomes.
Makes sense. So if we were to just last thing, so I will take up like few of the Q&A then. If you were to wrap this up and, in a nutshell, sort of 1 or 2 minutes, give an idea to anyone who is getting started with their search everywhere strategy, what would you give them? Like, what are the 3 or 4 points you would give them as a step-by-step playbook, let's say?
I think, and I'm speaking here to a lot of SEOs who historically have been so focused on search volume. And it's funny for me to be preaching about this right now because over the years, my colleague Chad and I, he would joke and be like, "Oh, Nikki says there's no search volume for that. Like we can't do it." And I used to be so beholden to search volume. The playbook is changing, right? Like the way that people search on ChatGPT, and you can get the prompt volumes out of Writesonic and other platforms, but knowing your user is everything. If you truly understand your users, which, comes from doing research about your users and your audience, really taking the time to get to know them, you don't have to focus so heavily on search volumes. You really just have to focus on the user. Where do they spend time? What are their pain points? What did your product or service solve for those people? And how can you bring that to life? Not everywhere that, everyone is online. If you have a limited budget, you don't want to do all the things across every platform. Pick a few platforms, focus there, prove things out, and then expand from there.
Sounds good. I think that's a good wrap up. I know we have 5 minutes left, so there are a couple of questions. We'll just quickly go through them. I think some people had posted in the chat as well, so let me just pull it up from there as well. Um, I think someone had asked which platforms do you recommend to work in for B2B companies? A very quick one, I think, if you can answer from your point of view.
Yeah, I mean, it can differ, but I would say YouTube is often huge in a lot of those spaces. And then we talked a little bit about LinkedIn today, right? How that's showing up in Google SERP. It's shaping AI answers. So YouTube, and LinkedIn in terms of social platforms. But more importantly, it's doing the research using a tool like Writesonic to understand what's the third party content that's getting cited, because a lot of those roundups and listicles are huge in the B2B space. And so if you're not trying to connect with those publishers, you're definitely going to be in a tricky spot when it comes to B2B.
Makes sense. And there was one more question that just came in. Any tips for B2C platforms specifically? So we'll just cover it because we're on this topic. Yeah.
Wait, sorry, say that. I
So
missed the
someone
question.
just asked, so I think Rohit just asked, do you have any specific tips for B2C specifically? So you just talked about B2B. Any tips for
Mm.
B2C specifically?
Gosh, I have so many tips, but I would say the one thing that I'm really passionate about right now that I think people are not thinking enough about is influencer and how important that can
Mm.
be, especially for B2C. So, yeah, look at what your competitors are doing. What are content creators in the space saying about you and your brand? And what are they saying about competitors? Are your competitors leveraging influencers to show up in more places? And how can you kind of catch up there?
Good point. Good point. And I think to the video point that we were discussing before, so Stacy is asking, are you seeing brands using AI generated video content show up on YouTube specifically versus recordings of actual humans for AI citations?
You know what? I don't think I've seen a lot of that yet. I know AI tools are getting so good. You could potentially be watching something AI and not know. I have not seen like fully AI generated content performing across like our client spaces yet, but I'm sure it's out there. And I think when you're thinking about how to launch a video strategy, AI should be a part of that. But I think we're in this era where authenticity and something that's a lot more authentic and real is just going to go further. So I wouldn't recommend going all in on AI video.
Makes sense. Also, I think I recently saw when I was making a post today on LinkedIn, they've added this new tag where if you're producing images using Google Nano
Mm.
Banana or any of those, it actually attributes it and says synthetic media and where exactly it came from. So that's quite interesting.
Yep.
And I think they'll start using it as part of their algorithm for ranking and stuff as well.
Yeah, everyone's using AI to create content, and the more that that happens, that means
Yeah,
that AI produced stuff is going into the training data, and your input impacts your output. So I think it's this scary world where you have to have a human touch to everything. Don't let AI be you want to use AI in your content strategy, your video strategy, but the more authentic you can be, the more you can weave in subject matter expertise, the better, because we don't want the bots feeding the bots, and eventually, only the real stuff is going to be what people are seeking out.
makes sense. And then Andre has it's a long thing, but she mentioned basically, I think in a nutshell, that influencer marketing is being cited more and more in SERPs as well as LLMs right now. What are the recommendations for small and medium businesses though who maybe, can't afford that or the authenticity is sort of going down due to all of these things. So what is the recommendation for small and medium businesses in that case?
Yeah, I mean, influencer can get expensive. It doesn't have to be something crazy. So I would definitely say start small and hyper focused. My tip would be to, connect that keyword research into your influencer campaign so that you've really focused on like something specific that you want to be visible for. And make sure if you are going to invest a little bit, kind of as a pilot, that you think about that influencer content, that user generated content as search inventory. How can you work with the influencer to make something that can be repurposed across lots of other channels to squeeze the most out of it?
Makes sense. Then next one is from Ashu. What specific content types like FAQs, snippet style content, blog post should a company focus on to improve their presence on AI overviews and drive the conversion rates?
Yeah, it's all of those different types of snippet style content, right? So it's key takeaways. Usually we recommend to have those at the top of the page, even outside of key takeaways, an explicit answer. So we work with, clients in the financial space. So if there's a question like, can I get a credit card with bad credit? Like actually ask the question at the top of the article that's about that and put an explicit yes and then a small elaboration, even up above the key takeaways. Then you've got your key takeaways. You want to make sure that your heading structure is very clear and logical. Add those FAQs down at the bottom of the page. Comparison tables can be, especially important. And don't think about those types of snippet style content optimizations just for blog content. Product pages, solutions pages, those should also have FAQ content as well.
Sounds good. I think we're up on time. There are a few more questions, but I've shared Nikki's LinkedIn. I don't know, Nikki, if you are active on LinkedIn or any other platform. So feel free to connect with Nikki there. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn. And we're happy to answer any questions after
Yeah,
this webinar
same.
ends as well. But yeah, really, really appreciate you, Nikki, for taking the time out, answering all those questions, sharing a lot of insights.